A drummer from an underground punk band claimed he was offered $50,000 to murder Kurt Cobain. He named the person who made the offer on camera. 1 week later, he died under mysterious circumstances that were never fully investigated. Now you will hear the part of the story no one ever truly understood. Eldon was not a famous man. He fronted the Mentors, a shock rock band so deliberately offensive that most venues refused to book them. They performed in executioner hoods and sang lyrics designed to provoke outrage. Eldon, who went by the stage name Eldon Hoke, was crude, confrontational, and frequently intoxicated. He was not the kind of witness prosecutors dream about, which is precisely what happened, until he made a claim so explosive that ignoring it became impossible. March 1994. Kurt Cobain was missing. Courtney Love had hired private investigator Tom Grant to find her husband. Grant, a former Los Angeles County Sheriff's detective, began methodically asking questions, following leads. What he uncovered would haunt him for decades. April 8, 1994. An electrician discovered Kurt's body in the greenhouse room above the garage. The official ruling came swiftly: suicide. The Seattle Police Department closed the case within days. The world mourned. Nirvana was over, but Tom Grant kept investigating. Something about the scene felt wrong to him. He compiled inconsistencies, questioned witnesses, pursued angles law enforcement had dismissed. And then, 3 years later, he received a phone call that would change everything. January 1997. A documentary filmmaker named Nick Broomfield was working on a film about Kurt Cobain. He contacted Tom Grant, who mentioned there was someone Grant believed the filmmaker should interview. Someone who had information, someone who had made a shocking allegation. That someone was Eldon Hoke. The interview took place in March 1997. Broomfield's cameras rolled as Eldon Hoke, visibly intoxicated, sat in a cluttered apartment. The conversation started casually. Eldon rabbled, made offensive jokes, but then Broomfield asked him directly about Kurt Cobain. Eldon's demeanor shifted. He leaned forward, his eyes focused, and he made a claim that would reverberate through every conspiracy theory about Kurt Cobain's death. Courtney Love offered me $50,000 to kill Kurt Cobain, Eldon said on camera. She wanted him dead. She asked me if I knew anyone who would do it. Broomfield pressed for details. When did this conversation happen? Where? What exactly was said? Eldon claimed the offer was made in late 1993 or early 1994. According to Eldon, Courtney approached him at a social gathering and asked if he knew anyone willing to kill Kurt for money. Eldon said he thought she was joking at first, but Courtney persisted. She was serious. She wanted Kurt dead. Eldon told Broomfield he mentioned a name to Courtney, someone from the Los Angeles punk scene, who might be desperate enough to consider such an offer. He gave Courtney this person's name, though he never believed anything would actually happen. The interview was recorded, preserved on film. Eldon Hoke had gone on record with an allegation of solicitation for murder, and then the filmmaker asked, "Would you take a polygraph test?" Eldon agreed. He insisted he was telling the truth. The interview wrapped. Broomfield had his footage. Tom Grant had a witness statement, and Eldon Hoke went back to his life, apparently unaware that he had just made himself dangerous. 8 days later, Eldon Hoke was dead. April 19, 1997. Eldon was struck by a train in Riverside, California. The official report described the death as accidental. Witnesses reported seeing Eldon walking on or near the railroad tracks in an intoxicated state. The train engineer said he saw a figure on the tracks but could not stop in time. Eldon was killed instantly. The Riverside Police Department conducted a brief investigation. They interviewed witnesses, examined the scene, reviewed Eldon's recent activities. Their conclusion: accidental death. Eldon Hoke, known for his heavy drinking, had wandered onto the tracks while intoxicated and been struck by a train. Tragic, but not suspicious. Case closed, but the timing was extraordinary. 8 days after making a recorded allegation that Courtney Love solicited him to murder Kurt Cobain, Eldon Hoke was dead. and the circumstances raised questions that were never answered. Witnesses who knew Eldon said he was familiar with the area. He had walked those streets many times. Even intoxicated, would he really stumble directly into the path of an oncoming train? Some who were present claimed Eldon seemed unusually paranoid after the Broomfield interview. He allegedly told friends he was worried, that he had said too much. These claims were never officially verified. Tom Grant, upon hearing of Eldon's death, immediately suspected foul play. The timing was too perfect. A witness who had accused Courtney Love was now dead, just over a week after going public. Grant feared that Eldon's death should have been investigated as a potential homicide, but the Riverside police stood by their findings. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, no witnesses reporting suspicious activity around the tracks. Eldon Hoke had died in an unfortunate accident, the result of intoxication and poor judgment. Nothing more. Nick Broomfield included the Eldon Hoke interview in his documentary, which was released later in 1997. The film presented Eldon's allegations alongside other questions about Kurt Cobain's death, the investigation, and Courtney Love's behavior in the days surrounding April. The documentary was controversial, criticized by some as exploitative and irresponsible, praised by others as a necessary examination of unanswered questions. Courtney Love denied Eldon's allegations completely. She called him a liar, a drunk, an attention seeker, making outrageous claims for publicity. She pointed to Eldon's reputation, his history of provocative statements, his documented substance abuse. She suggested that anyone taking his allegations seriously was either naive or malicious. And she had a point. Eldon Hoke was not a credible witness by traditional standards. He had a history of making shocking statements. He was frequently intoxicated. He performed in a band whose entire aesthetic was based on offense and controversy. Believing his allegations required accepting the testimony of someone whose entire public persona was designed to be unreliable. But Tom Grant and others who investigated Kurt's death argued that dismissing Eldon solely because of his character was a mistake. Even unreliable people sometimes tell the truth. Even witnesses with credibility problems can provide valuable information, and Eldon had been willing to take a polygraph test, something that suggested he believed his own claims. The polygraph never happened. Eldon died before arrangements could be finalized. Whatever truth or fabrication existed in his allegations died with him on those railroad tracks in Riverside. The name Eldon claimed to have given Courtney was never confirmed. Tom Grant investigated, attempted to identify who this person might have been, but without Eldon alive to provide additional details, the lead went nowhere. If Courtney had indeed approached someone else after speaking with Eldon, that person never came forward, never admitted involvement, never provided testimony. Over the years, Eldon Hoke's allegations became part of the larger collection of conspiracy theories surrounding Kurt Cobain's death. Some pointed to his interview as proof that Kurt was murdered. Others dismissed it as the ramblings of a drunk shock rocker looking for attention. The truth remained elusive, trapped somewhere between what Eldon said on camera and what actually happened in those final days of Kurt Cobain's life. But the questions persisted. Why would Eldon make such a specific allegation? What did he have to gain? He was not trying to sell a book. He was not launching a media career. He was a marginal figure in an underground music scene, and his allegations, if false, would only bring him trouble. And then there was the timing of his death. 8 days. 1 week after going public with an accusation of solicitation for murder, Eldon Hoke was struck by a train, officially ruled an accident, never investigated as a potential homicide, quickly forgotten by everyone except those who believed Kurt Cobain's death was more than a simple suicide. Tom Grant continued his investigation for years, compiling evidence, interviewing witnesses, pushing for the case to be reopened. He argued that the Seattle Police Department had conducted a superficial investigation, that crucial evidence had been overlooked or ignored. The rush to label Kurt's death a suicide had prevented a thorough examination of alternative possibilities. The Seattle police reviewed the case multiple times over the decades, most recently in 2014, 20 years after Kurt's death. Each review concluded the same thing: suicide, no evidence of foul play, no reason to reopen the investigation. The case remained closed. Eldon Hoke's allegations were never officially investigated. The Riverside Police Department's conclusion that his death was accidental was never challenged in court, and the person Eldon claimed to have named to Courtney Love, if that person even existed, never stepped forward. What remains is a recording. Nick Broomfield's footage of Eldon Hoke, intoxicated but insistent, claiming that Courtney Love offered him money to kill Kurt Cobain. The interview exists. It can be watched. Eldon's words are preserved, but whether those words represent truth or fabrication, reliable testimony or drunken fantasy, remains unanswered. For those who believe Kurt Cobain was murdered, Eldon Hoke's allegations are crucial evidence. For those who accept the official suicide ruling, Eldon was an unreliable witness, making sensational claims. And for those uncertain, caught between the official narrative and the persistent questions, Eldon represents something more troubling: a potential witness who died before the truth could be established. The circumstances of Eldon's death, officially an accident, have never been re-examined as a potential homicide. The timing, just 8 days after his recorded allegations, has never been officially investigated as potentially suspicious, and the questions he raised about Courtney Love's possible involvement in Kurt's death remain part of an unresolved debate that continues decades later. Eldon Hoke died on April 19, 1997, 3 years and 11 days after Kurt Cobain's body was discovered. He took his allegations, his testimony, and whatever furtive or lies they contained to his grave. The train that struck him left no room for further questions, no opportunity for polygraph tests, no chance for deeper investigation. And perhaps that was exactly the point. The Mentors continued briefly after Eldon's death, but the band was never the same. Eldon had been its driving force, its controversial frontman. Without him, the Mentors faded into obscurity, remembered primarily by those interested in the darkest corners of punk rock history. But Eldon's legacy became something different than his music. He became the man who accused Courtney Love, the drummer who claimed he was offered money to kill Kurt Cobain, the witness who died under suspicious circumstances. The broader context of Kurt Cobain's death added weight to Eldon's claims. Kurt's family history included multiple reported tragedies. His great-uncle Burl Cobain reportedly died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Burl's brother Kenneth also died by firearm. Courtney Love emphasized this history repeatedly after Kurt's death, pointing to what she called the Cobain curse, suggesting Kurt's death was inevitable rather than suspicious. But investigators like Tom Grant argued that emphasizing family history served a purpose. It directed attention away from the circumstances of Kurt's death and toward a predetermined narrative. The evidence at the scene raised questions that were never adequately answered. The amount of substances reportedly in Kurt's system was, according to some experts, high enough that physical capability became questionable. The positioning of the body struck some observers as unusual. The lack of clear fingerprints on the shotgun seemed strange. Tom Grant cataloged these inconsistencies. He interviewed witnesses who reported seeing Kurt in the days before his body was discovered, timelines that contradicted official estimates. He documented Courtney's behavior, phone calls she made, statements she gave, actions Grant believed warranted closer scrutiny. And then there was Eldon Hoke, willing to go on camera and make an allegation that, if true, changed everything. If Courtney had indeed solicited someone to kill Kurt, then every piece of evidence needed re-examination. What looked like one thing might have been another entirely. But Eldon died before his allegations could be tested. The polygraph that might have lent credibility never happened. The additional details he might have provided were lost, and the person he allegedly named to Courtney, if that person existed, remained silent. The years passed. Kurt Cobain's death became part of rock mythology, debated in documentaries, discussed in forums, analyzed in books. Some accepted the official ruling, others insisted it was murder. And caught between these positions were witnesses whose testimony could have mattered, but whose credibility remained forever questionable. April 19, 1997. A train railroad tracks in Riverside. An intoxicated man who had said too much. 8 days after making allegations that, if true, implicated one of rock music's most famous widows, officially ruled an accident, never investigated as anything else. Eldon Hoke's death ensured his allegations would remain exactly what they were in that Nick Broomfield interview. Claims without corroboration, testimony without verification, questions without answers. He named Courtney Love on camera. He said she offered him money. He said he gave her a name, and then, 8 days later, he died. For those who believe Kurt Cobain was murdered, Eldon represents a witness who was silenced. For those who believe Kurt died by his own hand, Eldon represents an unreliable attention seeker whose death was Wuchet timing. The truth remains trapped between competing narratives, inaccessible to those who were not there. What is certain? Eldon Hoke made a specific allegation about Courtney Love. He made it on camera. He agreed to a polygraph test. So 8 days later, he was dead. These are facts. Everything else remains open to debate. The most dangerous secret, it seems, is not always the one that gets revealed. Sometimes it is the one that almost got proven.